Your gold stopped climbing, and somewhere in the back of your mind, a little voice started asking whether you got in too late. It ran for months. You watched it, you felt good about it, and then one stretch, it just went flat and started giving ground. And the same financial channels that never told you to buy it in the first place suddenly found their voice again. All of them nodding along that the run is finished, and the smart thing now is to take your profit and go home. So let me answer the question in the title before I do anything else, because you did not click on this to be strung along. The real reason your gold stalled is not that the story is over. It is that a genuine bull market in gold does not move in a straight line. It never has. And the pullback you are staring at right now is the single most normal thing a rising gold price ever does. The people telling you it is the end are the same people who have been wrong at every one of these moments before. And I want to walk you through exactly why. Here's the fact I want you chewing on for the rest of this video. The most famous gold run in living memory, the one that turned a sleepy metal into a household word, did not glide upward like an escalator. It stalled. It pulled back. At one point in the middle of that climb, gold got cut nearly in half, top to bottom, and every soul who lived through it was absolutely certain the great gold market was dead and buried. And then it did the most violent part of its entire rise anyway. That whole episode is the map, and once you see it, you will never panic at a flat stretch the same way again. Go back to the early 1970s. The dollar had just been cut loose from gold. The window slammed shut and never reopened. And for the first time in generations, the price of gold was free to float and find its own level. It took off. In just a few years, it multiplied several times over, and for a while, it looked like a one-way street. In my years in the gold and silver world, I have learned that a one-way street is precisely the setup that gets people hurt, because they start to believe the line only points one direction. And notice the word they used when they closed that window on gold. They called it temporary, a temporary suspension, a stopgap, something to be tidied up once the dust settled. It was never reversed. It is still in force to this day, more than half a century later, which tells you everything about how these things actually go. The powerful reach for gold, or reach to sever themselves from it, in moments of strain, and then the emergency measure quietly becomes the permanent arrangement while everyone moves on. Hold that in your mind, because the same instinct to call a decisive move merely temporary is the same instinct now calling your gold's climb a passing fad. Then came the middle of that decade, and the market did something almost nobody remembers now. Gold rolled over. From a high somewhere north of one level, it slid and slid, and by the time it found a floor a couple of years later, it had lost close to half its value. Cut nearly in half. Sit with that number. Anyone who had bought near that interim top watched the value of their gold get chopped down while the newspapers ran the obituary. The experts of the day declared the gold thing a passing fad, a 1970s novelty that had run its course. I want you to meet the kind of person this actually happened to, because a chart does not have a stomach, and a person does. Picture a retired tool and die man in a mill town in Ohio, somebody who spent 40 years making things with his hands and did not trust paper promises he could not hold. He had put a slice of his savings into gold because it felt honest, and he had watched it climb and felt smart. Then that middle of the decade slide came, month after month, and he sat at his kitchen table with the statement in front of him, thinking he had made the mistake of his life, that he had bought the top like a fool, that the men on the television had been right, and he had been a stubborn old man. Everything in him was screaming to get out and cut the loss. Now here is the part that decided the rest of his retirement. If he sold in that stretch, he locked in a brutal loss at the exact moment of maximum pain, and he handed his metal to somebody far calmer than he was. Because gold did not stay down. From that beaten down floor, the metal turned and did the most explosive leg of the entire run, climbing many times over into a blow-off top by the start of the next decade. A top so high, people lined up outside coin shops to buy in at prices that dwarfed where our tool and die man had ever been scared out. The stall that felt like the end was actually the intermission. The people who understood that owned the second half of the movie. The people who did not gave their seats away. But here is where it gets genuinely strange, and this is the part the financial channels will never sit still long enough to explain to you. That great run was not one stall. It was a whole series of them. Over that decade, gold had multiple sharp, ugly, stomach-churning pullbacks on its way to its peak, and every single one of them, at the time, looked exactly like a top. Not one of them announced itself as a mere pause. They all felt terminal. That is the nature of the thing. A real bull market in gold is not a smooth ride interrupted by the occasional dip. It is a staircase of frights, and the price of the upside is that you have to hold through the frights without knowing in the moment which one is the last. And that brings me to the enemy in this story, because there always is one. Ask yourself a simple question. Who makes money when you get scared out of a stall? Not you. The big trading desks and the bullion banks make their living on your churn, on the fear that makes a nervous holder dump good metal into a soft patch. When the financial media puts on a parade of guests to tell you the run is over the moment gold catches its breath, understand that a frightened seller is somebody's paying customer. The silence about who is on the other side of your panic sale is not an accident. It is the business model. Now, let me be honest with you the way I would want somebody to be honest with me, because I am not going to insult you by pretending I can see the future. This is a case, not a guarantee, and it is not personal financial advice. Gold can go sideways longer than feels comfortable. It can pull back again from here before it does anything else. A stretch of geopolitical calm can pull the fear premium right out of it for a while, and softer oil and a shakier dollar can push the numbers around in ways nobody predicts on any given week. I cannot tell you the day it turns, and anyone who claims they can is selling you something. What I can tell you is that the reason it's stalled is ordinary. The history is on the record, and the mistake that actually destroys retirements is not owning gold through a flat patch. It is selling it into one. And this is exactly the point where I want to stop and talk to you directly. Because if any of this is landing, you should have the information in your hands, not just in your head. Here is a fact that tells you where the real weight has already shifted. Gold has quietly climbed past the euro to become the second largest reserve asset held by the central banks of the world, sitting behind only the dollar itself. Think about who is doing that. These are the most careful, least emotional institutions on earth, and they are the ones stacking the metal while the television tells you it is finished. That is the backdrop for the free guide my family put together, the Retirement Wealth Protection Guide. It is written for Americans who are 55 and up with $100,000 or more in a 401k or an IRA, and it walks you through how folks are diversifying a portion of their retirement into physical gold and silver inside the account they already have, without taxes and without penalties. This is not just for insiders. If you have $100,000 or more in any retirement account, this is for you. If you are watching on your TV, just scan the QR code on your screen. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to readfamilyguide.com. From our family to yours, no obligation and nothing to buy. Now, let me show you why this stall in particular has a floor underneath it that the 1970s version did not even have. Back then, gold was climbing mostly on inflation fear and a broken monetary system. And when the mood shifted, the buying could vanish overnight. What is different now is who the marginal buyer has become. For a long stretch of history, gold behaved like a mirror of interest rates, falling whenever the return on safe bonds rose. That relationship broke. Recently, gold has climbed even while the yield on safe money stayed stubbornly high, and that is not supposed to happen under the old rules. The reason it happened is that the price is no longer being set by traders chasing yield. It is being set by buyers who do not care about the yield at all. Who are those buyers? Central banks that crossed a line and did not look back. They bought metal at a pace that ran past 1,000 tons a year for several years running, roughly double what they had been doing the decade before. It has cooled off a bit lately, choppier month to month, but the direction of travel is unmistakable. And here is the piece that lit the fire under them, and it is not a theory. When one of the world's major powers had its reserves frozen with the flip of a switch, every other central bank on the planet learned the lesson in real time. Money parked in someone else's financial system can be turned off. Gold sitting in your own vault cannot be frozen, cannot be sanctioned, does not answer to anyone's politics. That realization does not reverse when gold has a quiet week. It is structural, and it is why this floor is built out of something the 1970s simply did not have. But that is not even the biggest piece. And here's the part that should change how you read every headline from now on. The financial press covers gold as a price, a number that goes up and down and gives them something to chatter about. The central banks are not treating it as a price at all. They are treating it as an insurance policy against the very system those journalists work inside. When your evening news tells you gold stalled, they are describing the weather. The institutions are watching the climate. Those are two completely different things, and confusing one for the other is exactly the error that gets a careful retiree to sell at precisely the wrong moment. Let me give you a second piece of real history, because the crowd loves to forget that governments have reached straight into the gold market before, and not gently. There was a time, back in the 1930s, when the government of this country revalued the dollar against gold by decree, in a single stroke, a move that repriced the relationship by nearly 70% overnight. And just before it did, it made it illegal for ordinary Americans to even own gold in the first place. I am not telling you that to frighten you. I am telling you so you understand that gold is not some fringe curiosity the powerful ignore. It is the thing they reach for when the system is under real strain, which is exactly why they would prefer you not think about it too hard. Now watch what happens when you put the current stall next to those two histories side by side. The 1970s teach you that a real gold bull stalls hard and repeatedly, and that each stall feels like the funeral. The reserve story teaches you that the biggest, coldest buyers in the world have quietly made gold their number two asset and are treating it as protection against a system that can freeze money at will. Put those together, and the flat patch you are worried about stops looking like an ending and starts looking like exactly what it has always been, the pause where the impatient hand their metal to the patient. And I want to be fair about the near term, because trust is built on the caveats, not the cheerleading. Part of the reason gold cooled recently is genuinely simple. When the world looks like it is stepping back from a conflict, the fear premium that had been baked into the price bleeds out. That is real, and it can happen again. We saw the same shape decades ago when a major war scare sent gold spiking on the invasion and then grinding right back lower as the situation de-escalated. A safe haven premium is priced in when danger looks likely, and it leaks out when danger recedes. So yes, a calmer world can hold gold back for a while. That is a headwind, and I am not going to hide it from you. But notice that it is a headwind about mood and headlines, not about the deep structural buying that has nothing to do with any single week's news. Here is the honest tell that separates a top from a pause, and it costs you nothing to check. A real top in any market is a mania. It is the whole country suddenly an expert, your barber giving you gold tips, a line around the block, the thing leading every broadcast with breathless excitement. Look around you right now. Is that what you see? Or do you see skepticism, shrugging, a financial press that treats every dip as vindication and cannot wait to write the obituary? Manias do not sound like that. The sourness in the coverage is not evidence the run is over. It is evidence the crowd has not truly arrived yet. Which brings me to the thing I most want you to understand before you do anything with what you own. The people who position well in gold almost never do it at the exciting moment. They do it in the boring, uncomfortable, everybody else has lost interest moment, which is usually a stall that feels like a mistake. By the time it is obvious, by the time gold is leading the news and your neighbor is bragging and every advisor who ignored it for years suddenly recommends it, the cheap and easy part is already behind you. The central banks understood that. They did not wait for permission or a comfortable feeling. They accumulated straight through the quiet stretches, while the mainstream was looking the other way. And being early is precisely why they will do well. You are being handed one of those quiet stretches right now. That is not a curse. That is the whole opportunity. So what do you actually do with your own position, in plain terms? Not a prescription, just the principles I have watched hold up over a long time sitting with people trying to protect what they spent a lifetime building. First, size it so a shakeout can never force your hand. The tool and die man in Ohio got scared out because the pain got bigger than his conviction. And the way you avoid that is to only hold what you can hold through a fright without flinching. Second, own the real thing, not a paper claim on the real thing. Because in the moment that matters, a promise and a possession are two very different animals. And third, never ever sell into the bottom of a stall just because the fear got loud. That is the one move that turns a temporary paper loss into a permanent real one. And that is where I want to leave you, with both the upside and the guardrail in the same hand, because protecting what you have already built matters more than chasing the next dollar. If you are near or in retirement with $100,000 or more in a 401k or an IRA, the free Retirement Wealth Protection Guide lays out how families are diversifying a portion of their savings into physical gold and silver inside the accounts they already have, and how that same decision protects not only what you built, but what your children and your grandchildren will one day inherit. And for those of you who watch all the way to the end here, my family also offers a free, no pressure, one on one educational web conference for viewers with 100,000 or more who mention that they saw this video through. There is no fake deadline on this. The honest reason to look now is simply that the window where a decision like this is still calm and cheap and reversible is exactly the window when nothing feels urgent, which is this quiet stretch you are living through today. If you are watching on your TV, scan the QR code on the screen. If you are on your phone or computer, go to readfamilyguide.com. From our family to yours. So the next time your gold goes flat and the voice on the television tells you the party is over, I want you to remember the tool and die man in Ohio staring at his statement in the middle of that famous decade, certain he had blown it, one nervous signature away from selling his medal to somebody coma, right before the biggest move of the whole run. Your goal did not stall because the story ended, it stalled because that is what a real story does before its next chapter. The only question that ever mattered is which side of that stall you choose to stand on.